Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books. Woke media is in a panic because Warner Brothers Discovery can't succeed by making superhero movies just for the fans. Why would they want to make superhero movies for their fans? I mean, Forbes is convinced that if they're focusing on just making superhero movies that fans want to see, obviously they can't succeed. And you know, this article is important to me because I think there are going to be more articles that talk about this, that just start to complain more and more. You know what all the backlash was over Batgirl getting canceled, and then other Spanish-related shows and things like that that Warner Bros. Discovery was developing for HBO Max. And there's this tendency to tell Warner Bros. Discovery that they need to be more like Marvel, be more inclusive like Marvel. Now, they had a lot of diverse characters and many different types of heroes in Black Adam. And when I say diverse, I do mean people from different backgrounds and you know, places in the world, so that they could have the little representation elements, although it made sense in context with whatever the story was. And that's fine. You know, you do have settings that are, if it's going to be in the Middle East, you expect to see Middle Eastern people in those roles. They did have some race swapping. They race swapped Hawkman. There's going to be some of that, and that's fine, but that's not enough. Not for Forbes. Forbes wants them to do more, and Forbes is warning them that they can't succeed with superhero movies unless they're more like Marvel. I don't know if you agree or if you disagree. You could definitely let me know in the comments below. Let's get into this article, though. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up when you like it. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. With Warner Bros. Discovery's superhero release, Black Adam grossing $67 million domestic and actually $73 million international at the box office this weekend, the marketing led by film superstar Dwayne Johnson has focused on the message, we're listening to the fans. And this does set it apart from Marvel, who we know is not listening to the fans. Marvel has reinvented the superhero genre with She-Hulk recently. You see how well that's been received? Not so well. But fandom is divided on what they want. That is not the case. And these films have to be made for the mainstream global audiences if they're going to achieve blockbuster successes needed to compete with Marvel Studios. Now, let's also remember that this is the same Marvel Studios that released Eternals, which was a disaster at the box office. Black Widow, which is a recent disaster at the box office. Thor, Love and Thunder did fairly well in its opening weekend and then dropped off by 70% by the second weekend. We'll see how Black Adam does in the second weekend. Maybe it's going to drop off 70%. I don't think it will, because I've seen Black Adam and it's a great superhero action movie. It's exactly what you would expect, especially something like almost a Sony style movie, like what Sony is doing with Venom and Spider-Man. You get, like, it's just superhero stuff. They're really not going heavy into the Marvel feminization and representation woke genre. But Forbes don't like that. Warner Bros. Discovery simply cannot succeed in the long term by making the marketing these movies just for the fans. Well, actually, that's not correct. You know, the best example you could take is from Marvel's launching with Iron Man back in the day, when they had their own group of, you know, films that they were doing for their own Marvel studio. They built from film to film to film to film, and then eventually collected themselves into the Avengers, which is an enormous film franchise, at least until Feige does whatever he does to it, but it has done tremendous business. But the Avengers wouldn't have been as successful as it was if they didn't have those movies that came before. So it's not about producing, you know, movies or projects that have an appeal to everyone. They all have to have their own individual focus. And the way that you know if you're on track is by listening to fans. I mean, that is just the way it is. And for them to pretend, you know, a lot of people are still pretending that Marvel doesn't have any problems. Marvel is going off a tremendous momentum of having done things right for many years. and having a lot of people really excited about the movies. It's not that way anymore. They're losing steam. It hasn't collapsed. Not yet. Let's see what happens with Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. Will that do as much business? Let me know what you think in the comments below. As Black Panther 1, especially knowing that basically Black Panther is not even going to be in the Black Panther Wakanda Forever movie. Maybe a few minutes here and there when they kill him. Ridiculous. Warner Brothers' new leadership is attempting to, for the umpteenth time, to course correct for their DCEU properties. And many of the decisions thus far have been controversial, if not downright shocking and perplexing. This shouldn't... And now look at this comment. This caused further division in a fandom already split into multiple factions that are often hostile to one another. You know, this is like what they say about the political situation in the United States. It's so divisive. Can't you just all agree with one or the other side? Like, no, they're coming from two very different places. However, it's not that way with DC fandom. Yes, there are people that are hardcore about Zack Snyder, but they'll enjoy a good superhero movie if it's a good superhero movie. If you put a lot of woke stuff into a Batgirl project, you think Batgirl would have done $140 million internationally this weekend? If you put up Batgirl, Black Adam, and the first 2 episodes of She-Hulk, a theatrical version, just cut it into a theatrical version, tell me which one you think would have done the best. And what the fans would have said before the movies were released. They could tell you which ones they're interested in, which ones they're going to go see. That's the value of the fans. You can't lose touch with the fans. You lose touch with the fans, then your intellectual property is worthless anyway. And you're not going to build momentum. If you don't have people who are invested from, movie 1 and movie 2 to then go tell all their friends, hey, you should be checking this out. You should be following this. I'm following this. Like, it becomes a cultural experience with people and the rest of their friends. If you don't have that, you don't have those invested people, it's never going to be the success that Marvel used to be. And Marvel will never be that success again unless they have to completely reboot, which they really ought to. Black Adam wound up an amalgamation of elements intended to appeal in nominal ways to multiple of these factions, yet in ways that also seem likely to alienate many of those fandoms in other ways. And regardless of what any of us personally thinks or prefers about this movie or others in the DC stable, they need to focus less on selling their films as for the fans and more toward appealing to what mainstream audiences want and respond to most from DCEU movies. The thing that the author misses entirely is because, it's fine to say that, look, so in terms of the marketing and the promotion, no one goes to see a movie that's, quote, they're not promoting the movie that, like, you should only go see the movie if you're a fan of Black Adam or a fan of what Zack Snyder was doing because it's dark and edgy again. They didn't really promote the movie that way. However, they were coming off of the Batgirl nonsense, and people know that Batgirl was below quality. And people know that Black Adam was produced under the same team. So it's very easy to expect Batgirl was done. People know basically what was going on in the Batgirl story and why it was the movie could not be released. It was changing what DC is all about. And it was doing it in a way that wasn't respectful to the existing canon. So you can't do stuff like that. And then unfortunately, The Rock's movie is following right after that. People have to wonder, like, well, is this going to be like what Batgirl was? And the answer is it's definitely not. But of course they had to establish that right now. And, did that switching of gears like cause problems and potentially weakness and more skepticism about Black Adam as a film? Probably caused more skepticism from audiences. I wouldn't doubt it. Opening weekend numbers are healthy despite mostly negative reviews. And these reviews are, critics who aren't going to review anything like this well. If it's not Wakanda Forever, it's not going to get a good review from traditional critics. The thing that matters are the audience scores, because the audience are the real fans. The critics are just sitting there judging it. They're not the ones that are spending their own hard-earned money to go see these things and investing themselves in the characters as the fans do for years and years and sometimes decades, and then introduced to their own children. So the fans are very, very invested in the movies. The critics are not. The point is, Black Adam has a decent chance to top $500 million plus if it has a high-end weekly holds. Okay, and if it has better than expected weekday performances. Well, what Black Adam does internationally, who knows? It could do 400 million internationally, including domestic, everywhere. Or it could do 600 million, or maybe it just keeps running forever and does $1 billion. I was surprised that Aquaman did $1 billion. Who knows? Aquaman particularly, that's a long movie and it's pretty slow in some places. One thing you're going to see about Black Adam is it's not slow in any places. It's a 90 minutes of action in 124 minutes of movie with a great soundtrack. Highly recommend you check it out. The fact is, with nearly a $200 million budget and $100 million in marketing, this film needs to reach at least $650 million worldwide to cover its costs. Theatrically, sure. Maybe it's 600 million, maybe it's 500 million, maybe it's 700 million. Who knows? Was it a good investment to do this movie? Well, much better investment than Batgirl. That was a total wash. But because Hamada was on top of this, because they had different management when Black Adam was being made, somehow, instead of having Superman throughout the movie challenge Black Adam, which would have been easy, just get Henry Cavill back, and he's back now. Henry Cavill's announced that he's officially announcing he's back as Superman for future DC movies. This just came out today in Hollywood Reporter. He said he wanted to make it official, and I'll put a link to this in the description below so you can see his commentary himself on Instagram. But thanks to Black Adam, he's back. And he obviously could have been in Black Adam except for Walter Hamada. Now, what did that mean? That meant that you need to put the Justice Society in and establish this whole other superhero group inside of this movie, which burdened this movie with probably $50, $75 million of additional expense. Shazam was made for $100 million. This movie is doing 20% better than Shazam did opening day, domestic and international. Shazam wound up, I think they even mentioned in the article, 348 million, something like that. Internationally, it wound up doing well enough. And they have a sequel plan, that's fine. But this movie, the cost structure of this movie is held over from Hamada being there. But the most important thing is that you cancel Batgirl and you put out a real heavy action superhero, knock 'em up, fights, cool, high energy, fast paced superhero movie. That's the important thing. Whether they make money on this movie or not, it's not going to be a box office disaster for them no matter what. But it would have been a brand disaster to go ahead and release Batgirl, or God forbid, release Batgirl and try to release it theatrically. Once you do this, sets a tone. When you release Black Adam, it sets a tone of what you expect to come from the studio. At the very least, obviously, the DC Films Unit studio. So that's what people are going to expect. If they had released Batgirl, even if it was just on HBO Max, that's what people would have expected. This is why woke people are so upset about the cancellation of Batgirl, because the coup was almost there. They were almost able to flip DC into what they did successfully at Marvel. Really ruin Marvel. But they're not able to. And David Zaslav is not permitting it, the CEO of Warner Bros. Discovery. So you'll see a good situation where you've got Black Adam. You've got now Henry Cavill is back as Superman at the end of Black Adam. He's obviously going to appear in several DC movies because he's going to commit to Man of Steel 2, but he's going to be making appearances in other films. So you'll have more continuity there. So this is all because of Zaslav's approach. Because Hamada wasn't even going to let Cavill back as Superman because they had plans to do a new black Superman with J.J. Abrams, which obviously makes no sense. It just doesn't. So, I mean, that project is still in the works. I wouldn't expect if it gets canceled. Because why would they do that project? It makes no sense, especially bringing Henry Cavill back. Meanwhile, the way Cavill's return was treated probably didn't actually have the sort of appeal Warner Bros. Discovery intended, especially in any long-term sense. I mean, you can't evaluate anything long-term based on watching one movie except the tone anything else that was featured in a major way that you know they're setting up for future things, right? You know about Henry Cavill now, and you know that The Rock is a part of the universe, and you know that a DC movie you would expect to have a hell of a lot of action in it after watching Black Adam. You know it's not a Marvel movie. This is the kind of thing a Sony Marvel might do. It's not the kind of thing that Disney Marvel would do. Not even a question. And what's neat as well as how they used during the cameo for Henry Cavill, they used John Williams' theme for the 1978 Superman, which is closer to what Henry Cavill wants for Superman and what he's comfortable with, rather than the harder-edged Superman that Zack Snyder was setting up, which, you know, people like Zack Snyder's movies. They generated a lot of money. They were successful. You know, too bad he wasn't able to finish Justice League when it was first coming out. But, you know, it is what it is. I don't know if Snyder's going to return in some capacity. Maybe he does one project or two. I don't really, I'm just looking at this like, to think that the split in DC fandom is there are people that want the Snyder cut, and then there are people that, you know, don't want the Snyder cut. It's basically people just don't want the Marvelization. And you could tell me if you agree or disagree, please, in the comments below. They don't want the Marvelization of silliness and then making them all female characters and taking Thor's hammer away. And they're not looking for that. They're not looking for that, to get rid of the male characters at DC. They don't want that. And the fans don't want that. And basically it is treat the characters with some respect and some dignity. People can, of course, it's nice that people are allowed to have an opinion. According to this article, you can have an opinion that Cavill made a good Superman and that deserves another chance. And or that so far he's not been utilized in ways that you'd personally prefer. You could argue it's worth bringing Cavill back with nods at what came before within a tweaked approach, pursuing a new vision for his future. You know, this is where you see the author is kind of like upset. Now, he goes on to say, for that to work, however, there needs to actually be a vision for the future. And the studio and filmmakers need to understand what broader audiences want and expect from the character and the larger DCEU. Crucially, this requires focusing on the right audience in the first place. I mean, to think that they don't have that under consideration. The fans are the audience. And then you get to reach more people than you ever could with, let's say, comic books, because it's a major theatrical production. That's kind of the whole point. Fans may not want to hear it, but the fact is the audience whose opinions and desires matter most for a successful revival of Superman are mainstream moviegoers, not this or that narrow corner of fandom. Well, you know, there is no narrow corner of fandom. There are the people who are passionate about Superman and have been for years, who support Superman, who know what Superman is all about, what he's always been all about, and those are the people to target because they are the market. They're the core market. Those are the people who are going to be talking about the movie and are going to be excited about the movie. Alternatively, you could do what She-Hulk did, which is go in the complete opposite direction, find the people who are really interested in She-Hulk, make sure that your version of She-Hulk, from the origin to the execution to the treatment, and then even the treatment of the viewers, is so disrespectful that you burn every bridge and there's literally no one left to talk positively about it who sincerely feels that way. I think the current approach of DC, where they are focused on the fans, is a lot better. The DCEU needs a plan, and it needs leadership that stops stepping over all the plans. Well, I thought they didn't have a plan. How could they step over something they don't have? Fans who want a successful, good DCEU need to recognize the need for plans. Fans understand storylines for comic book characters are extensive. They are not like one movie's worth of plans or one graphic novel. There are plans that go way beyond that part of the media that they're actually consuming at the time. The fans understand it completely and deeply. That's why they care about the characters, because they've been following these stories usually for years. Even if they don't always agree with every aspect of those plans. You know, what's funny is you have two layers of things going on here. One, the writer of this article is a former screenwriter. So now he's a media specialist. So that's terrific. But look, the fans get it. You know, it's not just the treatment of the fans, it's also the treatment of Hollywood of the comic book material. You know, we talk about comics are used as source material for films and TV, and sometimes they're, you know, faithful to the material, meaning it's close to what the material was all about in the first place, and sometimes they're not. And you have people that, because the medium changes, you think that they get ownership of the work. So if you're a screenwriter, even though you never contributed to the origin of a character, you should have the complete say for all of the treatment of it and all the creative freedom that you want when you didn't create the character as the original writer. And that maybe you'll take some of their suggestions, but maybe not, because it's all for the greater good. Well, those people who create the original content obviously should be respected. The fans who bought the content, supported it, and promoted the content for usually all those years are the ones who should also be respected. And these authors, just because they come along upon a property and decide like they want to get a $1 million paycheck for writing a screenplay, it's not their work to be messing with in the first place. And there really ought to be a lot more going back to original creators and trying to understand where their head was at and what they were trying to do and what they think of the material. And you would think that in an article like this, and they're talking about the nature of the material and how it should be treated and how it should be finished and done, you would think he would have some mention in here for how you should honor the original creators and what their original intention of the material was. Instead, all you have is essentially this guy basically bashing fans and saying that DC needs to stop concentrating on trying to make movies for fans. It's too bad, but look, I don't know what you think of this. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I don't agree with this guy. Maybe you do. I'll have a link to this article in case you want to check it out for yourself. He does say a little bit more than I covered here. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up when you like it. And I will see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.